No Brandon for this week because he is on, believe me, a well-deserved vacation for this week. So you're stuck with me for the PGA podcast for today, breaking down the Charles Schwab Challenge. And as a consolation for no Brandon, no insights from Brandon today, we get a good feel. Really fun field for this week. We got JT, we got Jordan Spieth, Colin Morikawa, Daniel Berger all here. And it looks like a pretty fun field. So let's dive in, break this down, and get you set for PGA DFS at the Charles Schwab Challenge. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to get you set for the Charles Schwab Challenge. It is at Colonial Country Club. It tees off on Thursday. We're going to break everything down for you from a PGA DFS perspective and let you know which golfers you should be targeting for this week on FanDuel. But first, as always, we have a Q&A on Tuesday. But today, because there is no Brandon, we'll not be doing the regular PGA Q&A. Instead, I'm going to bring on Ryan Williams. We had him on for our NFL draft coverage back in April. Did a good job there. We're talking to him about Julio Jones, talk to him about whatever questions may be on your mind from a fantasy football perspective as we get closer to the month of June. That is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Swing by there with any questions you may have about best ball, startup dynasty drafts, dynasty rookie drafts, whatever it may be. Swing by 3:30 p.m. today. Check out that. All of my MLB Q&A after that. And of course, Brandon back with us next week for the regularly scheduled PGA DFS Q&A. Also, a lot of stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast. A big week this week because the Coca-Cola 600 coming up on Sunday. A NASCAR podcast previewing that will be up on Friday. Of course, as always, the MLB DFS podcast, the solo shot, goes up every weekday as well. Make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, please leave us a rating and review as well. This week's Charles Schwab Challenge is being played at Colonial Country Club. It is 7,209 yards and a par 70. So not the longest course, about 600 yards shorter than what they had last week. It is the 75th anniversary of this event. They've all been played at Colonial, which means we got a lot of data to work with here, which is a good thing for us for sure. Tight fairways here. They got a couple of dog legs, and that means that the advantage that long drivers usually get might not be as big it might not be as big this week as usual. There are 120 golfers in the field. The top 65 plus ties make the cut after the first two rounds. So more than half the field will make it this week. It's still going to be a tight squeeze. Still not feeling great about some value plays. So it's going to be difficult to find cut makers still, despite the fact that a larger percentage of the field will make the cut. We do want to make sure we are emphasizing golfers who can get through and get us points on Saturday and Sunday as well. When you're trying to find that, let's look at the stats to emphasize for this week. If you go to Data Golf and check out their course fit tool, driving distance is de-emphasized quite a bit, more than you see at almost any other course. Driving accuracy usually benefits when distance goes down, but here it's not necessarily more important either. It looks like, based on what they've got, that driving overall matters less. It's not an event where you want to, disregard off the tee play, but it's a week where you can de-emphasize it. Is the way that I phrase it. De-emphasize, don't disregard. Instead, it's approach play and around the green play that get jacked up relative to where they usually are. We can see that by looking at past years, looking at the process that I go through where I try to see where golfers who finished roughly in the top 15 or so ranked for the full season of the PGA Tour in various stats. Back in 2019, the average rank of those top 15 golfers for the full season was outside the top 100 in driving distance, driving accuracy, and good drive rate. Outside the top 100 for the top 15 in all three of those departments. For approach, they were 76th. They were 83rd around the green. So it wasn't quite as drastic in other years in 2018 and 2020, but this is not a spot where you need to be talented off the tee to compete. I'm going to have good drives gained in my key stats for this week because I do want to make sure I have guys who put themselves in good positions and can position themselves well when they need to. But this is not a spot where you need to be talented off the tee to compete. So there are guys, if off the tee play is their big bugaboo, I'm going to bump them up and feel better about them this week than I usually would. The greens here are bent grass. Putting importance is about the same relative to usual, so I'm not bumping it down or up. Just keeping it in there is something to consider for sure. The biggest deviation for me from my usual process for PGA DFS is I will increase the emphasis on the around the green play. Brandon talks a lot about how when you're looking at the variance in strokes gained around the green, the difference between the top guys and the bottom guys on a week-to-week basis is not going to be all that much because you don't have as many shots to gain or lose there. For this week, though, I will be leaning pretty hard on it and trying to emphasize guys who are good around the green. So I will be much more interested in it than usual, and I will be much more hesitant to use guys who are actively bad there. And there are some guys who fit that description who tend to be favorites of mine here on the Heat Check. So that will be a focal point for me this week. The key stats for me this week that I'll be mentioning throughout the podcast are strokes gained approach, strokes gained around the green, good drives gained, and bent grass putting. And again, it's kind of that approach play and the around the green play that matter more this week than usual. Approach, always the most important one, but this week I think even more so, something we want to keep a massive, massive eye on. We'll talk about some golfers who have done well at Colonial in the past in just 1 second. But first, hey, baseball fans, it is Dinger Tuesday. FanDuel has the $5 Dinger Tuesdays. All you have to do is bet a $25+ bet on the to hit a home run prop on any Tuesday MLB game. You'll receive a $5 site credit, $25 max, for each home run hit in that game by either team, regardless of if your bet wins or loses. Head over to FanDuel on Tuesdays to play the $5 Dinger contest. Must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $25. Terms apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, call 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's take a look at the course history here. And again, because they've been coming here for 75, 76 years, we got a lot of it. And it does seem like there are some guys who have done well here in the past. 2 guys who were in a playoff last year are back once again this year. And they're both in good current form. That's Daniel Berger and Colin Morikawa. Morikawa gained 6.3 in approach to get to the playoff last year. He also gained 3.4 on the greens. That's not super typical of Morikawa. He's not what I would deem to be a plus putter, so you might want to expect some regression there, but hey, he's pretty good. So I wouldn't value the course history. Value Morikawa because of the current form, not the course history. Berger got the win there in the playoff. It was in the middle of that incredible heater Berger was on last year. Gained 5.4 in approach, 5.2 on the greens, but he's a better long-term putter than Morikawa. He's not a massively plus guy, but better than Morikawa. Berger's overall struggles around the green do count as a red flag for me for this week. So if I'm ranking out the top end guys, Berger might not be towards the top of my list as a result of that. But he's one of those guys who is very good, whether it be at distance or with accuracy off the tee. So I think that it's worth noting how good he was last year and worth noting that he does struggle around the green, but Berger's still worth considering despite the issues around the green. Justin Rose traditionally has been very good here. He has a win and a third place finish within the past 3 years. And that's important because the interesting thing about the last year event is that the form for Rose now is actually better than it was going into that one, which I think is intriguing. He gained 6.4 tee to green last year and 5.4 on the greens. Last week at the PGA, Rose finished 8th. That could lead you to believe he has good current form and good course history. The issue is that he was just unconscious on the greens, went totally nuts with the putter. So if we're looking at the guys in the 10,000 range, Rose is at 10.8. I think that Rose might be a bit oversalaried. I think we might see people chasing him due to the course history, due to the good finish last week. I am more wary of that. So I think that Rose might be someone I'm not super high on relative to consensus for this week. One of the lower end guys with plus history here is Rory Sabatini. He has finished inside the top 23 straight years. He did miss a cut the year before that. Last year, Sabatini did most of his damage on the greens. He gained 5.5 there versus 2.2 tee to green, but he lost 2.1 on the greens back in 2018 and still finished 20th. So the good performance for Sabatini at this course, not just due to plus putting, he's been good elsewhere too. The form for for Sabatini is it's not terrible, but it's also not great. The approach has been more bad than good recently. So kind of similar to Rose, where I'm okay skipping over Sabatini at $8,400, even with what he has done at this event. So to me, the guys I think most interesting from a course history perspective are going to be Morikawa and Berger because of what they did last year, but also Jordan Spieth. And I think that Jordan Spieth is a good way to transition from the course history section into the current form section because Spieth so easily could have been in the course history section, but he fits well here too. He won here back in 2016. He has 3 top 10s since that time. And again, similar to Rose, those good finishes came for Spieth when his form was not nearly as good as it is now. If you're trying to look at Spieth's game right now and trying to find lingering red flags when he's been just really, really good recently, you'd point to the off the tee play. That's the one thing still missing from Spieth right now, and that matters less this week. So I think that Spieth, as the betting favorite and the highest salary guy in the field, is right where he should be. I know I have been lower on Spieth in general outside of the very, very recent stuff. I will not be lower on him this week. I think that Jordan Spieth, if you're playing a cash game, the first guy you start off with, very much worth his salary. For tournaments, I kind of want to be a bit more balanced, so I might not get to Spieth there. But the current form combined with the course history, it means it's justified where he's being viewed by the market overall right now. Another guy entering with really good play who should benefit from the course is Patrick Reed. He ranks just 59th in good drives gains, but he is the best bentgrass putter in the field. He ranks 3rd in the field in Data Golf's true strokes gained over the past 12 months. Reed finished 17th at the PGA last week, despite losing 2.2 off the tee. So, like Spieth, he is a guy who benefits from not being a massive off the tee event. Good elsewhere. You're not going to get a massive discount on Reed because he's $11,700. That's pretty high. But I could see myself starting some lineups with him despite the high salary. I think that Reed is very interesting and someone I'm hoping flies a bit under the radar this week, given how many guys are right around him from a salary and a betting perspective. Morikawa and Berger both there, coming off the impressive showing last year. He's sandwiched between them, so wouldn't be shocked if Reed flies under the radar, and if he does, I would be inclined to try to take advantage of that. As far as the non-elite guys who could be on the rise, one is Matt Wallace. We talked about him in current form a couple weeks ago. He's on a nice little stretch here. He was 3rd at the Valero Texas Open, 34th at the Masters, 16th at the RBC Heritage, 6th at the Wells Fargo, and then 55th at the PGA. And Wallace is getting those good finishes and making those cuts thanks to good all-around play. His stats are good. He ranks 26th or better in approach, around the green, and bentgrass putting. The longer-term data is not as favorable for Wallace, so I wouldn't say he's a priority at $9,800. But he's becoming an option. I think that if we didn't have as many really quality plays in the upper 9,000 range, we'll talk about a couple in the tier-by-tier breakdown, I think that Wallace might stand out more. Once we consider those guys, I'm okay being a tiny bit, deprioritizing him, but I would bet that he does wind up in my player pool for this week. As far as what the bookmakers are saying here, Jordan Spieth is the favorite at 10-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Colin Morikawa is 12-1. Justin Thomas is 13-1. Daniel Berger checks into 19-1 with Abraham Answer at 21-1. Then there are 6 guys all tied at 23-1. Those guys are Corey Connors, Joaquin Niemann, Patrick Reed, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, and Will Zalatoris. Sung J M rounds up the top group. He is 28-1. So basically what you have here from an odds perspective is a couple of tiers. You got 3 guys in one tier at the top. That's Spieth, Morikawa, and Thomas. Then there's a second tier, and that second tier includes everyone. If you want to include Sung Jae, you can, but I would say it includes everyone through those guys at 23-1. So I kind of like the idea of getting one out of Spieth, Morikawa, or Thomas, and then going balanced from there. You should get win equity. You can get some guys in that 23-1 range who are a little bit lower salary, like Scotty Scheffler has had some issues with the approach play at times, but coming off a good finish last week. Corey Connors is 11,000. No concerns with the approach there. So I don't mind the idea of getting one of those top 3 guys, then getting down to Scheffler, Connors, someone like that for your second slot, and then seeing where you're at from there. I I feel okay about some of the guys at $9,000 or lower this week. So I think we can make that work. And I would like to do so here because the win equity in getting two of those guys at 23-1 or shorter to me outweighs the downsides of being a bit less balanced. So that's the way I'm viewing things from roster construction for this week. I'm also not opposed to just going two guys from the second tier. Like you could conceivably go with like Corey Connors and Scotty Scheffler and feel fine about it. So if you want more balance, or maybe you go Patrick Reed and Connors or Scheffler, I'm also okay with that. So a couple different ways to play things here. If you want more balance, maybe lop off that top tier, go with two guys in the middle tier, or get one of the top three, one from the second tier, and then go from there. If you're looking for lower salary golfers with good win odds for this week, there are four who stand out there. Russell Knox is 75-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. His salary is $9,300. Chris Kirk is 80-1. He is $9,100. And then the two guys who are 100-1 or shorter, who have salaries under $9,000, are Harry Higgs and CT Pond. I do like Knox and Kirk, and we'll talk about them in the player picks. I am not as into Higgs and Pond, but I'm not going to say don't use them. I just don't think I will get there personally. I think that there's some other guys with salaries at $9,000 or lower who I'd rank above them. Not as high win odds, but I think that they do work. So to me, Knox and Kirk stand out from a value perspective in terms of win odds, but not as into Higgs and Pond there. Weather for this week, there will be some wind. It'll be decently high on Thursday. Starts off around 10 miles per hour. It gets up to 15 miles per hour for the afternoon. Friday, lower wind overall. Wind speeds start off around 8 miles per hour and then spike to a bit to about 11 miles per hour in the afternoon. If we're looking at this from like a waves perspective, I wouldn't think either group would have a big advantage over the other. There is a chance of rain on Friday midday, though, so that's something to check back on because rain can bring wind, rain can bring bad conditions. It's not super high rain odds, so I'd bet that we're good to go. But as of right now, I don't think you'll need to stack any particular tee time, just mentioning that I wouldn't mind checking back Wednesday night to make sure the forecast has not shifted and there are not increased rain odds during the day on Friday. Let's finish up here with our player picks for this week at the Charles Schwab Challenge. As always, going tier by tier, identifying my favorite golfers in each salary tier on FanDuel for this week. Starting off with the stud tier. In the upper tier, I do think Spieth is a great cash game play. Over the past 6 months, he leads the field by 0.34 strokes in Data Golf's True Strokes Gain tool. The one weakness that he has is off the tee. He's been getting better there recently, and that doesn't matter as much here. So I think that Spieth is a cash game option for me for sure. And if I'm building one cash game lineup, Jordan Spieth is in there. And I would say I don't mind being at least even with the field on Spieth in tournaments, just because, again, I think that getting one of those three guys in that upper tier does grade out as being a pretty good strategy for this week. I also do like Patrick Reed, as alluded to before. He's 11-7. Probably not getting that in the lineup with Spieth, but if you don't go Spieth, I think that Reed is a good alternative here. Should go overlooked given that he's between Morikawa and Berger. He benefits from the lack of necessity for good off the tee play here. So I think Reed, if you're looking for someone who will go overlooked in tournaments, who is going to be less popular than he should be, I think that Reed grades out as being a really good tournament play for this week. Other guys I am in on here in this tier, obviously Thomas and Morikawa at the top end. I'm very into getting one of those three guys between Spieth, Thomas, and Morikawa if I were ranking them. I think this might be different than the consensus, but I might go Thomas over Morikawa just because I feel better about Thomas's short game than Morikawa's. Morikawa is going to be better from a good drives game perspective, but I think that Thomas might be better overall. So I'll go Thomas over Morikawa, Spieth over both. Joaquin Niemann at 10-7. It's pretty interesting if you want to go a bit more balanced if you're if you're okay dipping out of that second tier. He's 30-1 to win, so you're not losing a lot of win equity there. He's not good around the green, which is why I couldn't commit to Joaquin Niemann. But there's enough where I do feel okay about him. So again, looking at Connors and Scheffler if you want to get lower salaried access to that second tier. Niemann kind of like a slight downgrade from there. And those are the guys who stand out most to me in this upper tier. The middle tier, again, in the 9 or the 9,000 range on FanDuel, it's a pretty good range, especially the top end. And I like options in each subsect of this tier. At the top end, I like Cameron Tringali a lot. He absolutely imploded on Friday at the PGA Championship. Brandon and I were slacking about Tringali on Thursday. We were slacking for different reasons on Friday. He's still in the field, so it doesn't seem like an injury thing. It sounds like he's good to go. Like if he had withdrawn, I'd be a bit more concerned. But as of right now, Tringali is still in there. So I'm assuming that he's healthy, and it was just like a difficult course, had a bad day, tanked as a result of that. The overall numbers on Tringali are still very good. He ranks 18th in good drives gained, 19th in approach, 15th around the green, 44th in bent grass putting. So if we're looking at the top tier, the high 9,000 range, I think that Tringali does stand out. I would say that Matt Wallace is interesting there. Kevin Streelman coming off a good event last week, finished 8th at the PGA Championship. He's $9,800, right there with Tringali and Wallace. I would rank them Tringali 1. Probably go Wallace 2 because the short game is a lot better there. And then I would go with Streelman number 3 in the upper 9,000 range. In the lower to mid 9,000 range, the two guys I like most there are Chris Kirk and Siwoo Kim. Kim is $9,500. He's another guy who benefits from decreased emphasis on driving. He is 41st in good drives gains. It's not like he's bad, but, not a strength for him. Ranks 30th in approach, 13th around the green, and 32nd in bent grass putting. Kim has a really rough history at this course. He has 4 missed cuts the past 5 years, no top 60 finishes, so really bad course for him. But I like the current form a lot, and I like it enough to be comfortable with Siwoo Kim. I'm hoping that the course history means people will not be on him. His betting odds are pretty long, too. Maybe it's just not a place he has a good read on, so I could just totally tank this one. But I do think that Siwoo Kim is someone who grades out well despite really bad course history. Kirk is $9,100. I really like what he offers. He ranks 13th in good drives gained, 24th in approach, and 18th around the green. He is a bit below average as a putter on bent grass, but I mean, it's $9,100. We got to make consolation somewhere. So I'm okay with that consolation for Chris Kirk, given how good he is elsewhere. Kirk and Kim are the top guys in this tier. I would also mention Russell Knox at 93. Talked about him briefly before. Good win odds for his salary. If we're looking at like depth of each tier, I would say the thinnest one as far as like overall number of guys I want to play is the lower end of the 9,000 range. I do like Knox and Kirk and Kim, but there aren't a lot of other guys I want to use. I don't think the gap between them and then the upper 8,000 guys is all that big. So I might not be in that range all that much. I might take the savings on someone in the 8,000 range and allow myself to get back up to Patrick Reed as opposed to someone else in the lower end of the 11,000 range. Not enamored with the value section, but I think that there are some good plays down here, some guys who I like. One of them is Patton Kazier. He is $8,900, ranks 52nd in good drives gained, 25th in approach, 49th around the green, and 59th in bent grass putting. So he's not a standout anywhere, but he's also not a negative. We saw Kazier gain 6.5 in approach at the Byron Nelson, but he hasn't gained off the tee since January 24th. It's been a hot second for Patton Kazier. That'll be less of a concern this week than usual. So Kazier, not usually a guy with upside because he just can't gain off the tee, but he might have more upside this week as a result of that being de-emphasized. So Kazier at $8,900, someone I have my eye on. I also do like Lucas Glover at $9,000. The approach play for Glover has been inconsistent, but what I want if a guy's inconsistent is the ability to hit the highs, and Glover can still do that. He gained 7.1 in approach at the Valero Texas Open, finished 4th there. He is also gaining around the green. He ranks 19th around the green the past 50 rounds. He's not bad on bent grass, so I do think Glover grades out well at $9,000 and someone I'll be in on here. The final guy is a heat check favorite, at least over the past couple of months, Doug Gim. He is $8,600. He is coming off back-to-back missed cuts, so hopefully we did not lead you astray in those events, but they weren't bad missed cuts. Like, they were fine. He gained 3.8 in approach at the Valspar, and that was across 2 rounds. Gained 3.8 in approach there. He gained 0.5 tee to green in 2 rounds at the Byron Nelson. So he missed the cut, but it wasn't an implosion. So I think that those events are still fine. He ranks 7th in good drives gained, 8th in approach, 23rd around the green. Doug Gim, $8,600. Extra savings there from Kazier and Glover. So I think all 3 of those guys are solid. But I would say, again, similar to the low 9,000 range, there aren't like a high volume of guys I want to use down here. So I might wind up having more exposure to those guys than I would like, just because I don't feel a lot of good ways to differentiate down here, but between Gim, Glover, and Kazier, and then Kirk at $9,100, you should have enough value to get to the overall thought process here of getting one guy in the top tier, one guy in the second tier, or two in the second tier. Either way, having two guys before that second fall off within the odds. I think that's the right way to play things for this week. No win picks from Brandon for this week. He is submitting them for Golf Digest, but we're not doing official head-to-head picks here on the podcast. But I'll give out mine because why not? If I'm picking guys relative to their odds at FanDuel Sportsbook, I'm going to go with Reed here. I talked a lot about him as being a guy who benefits from this not being a driving-heavy course. Reed is a good overall golfer. We know this over the past calendar year. Grades out really well once you adjust for his competition. He's a good bent grass putter, so I think the Patrick Reed at 23-1, potentially a bit undervalued for this week. My other win pick is something I don't like to do all that often. I think that picking long shots is a good way to just lose money and never win. But Cameron Tringali at 80-1, coming off that just absolute implosion on Friday last week, I think it's a good bounce back spot. Overall, Tringali's been solid. You don't go as low as he did Thursday without golfing really well. So the only concern I'd have with Tringali is that going to weigh on him mentally heading into this week, given that he didn't play all that well? Did he get the yips or something like that? I'm not going to overreact to one round of golf, especially when it's a high pressure spot like a major. So I think my win picks this week, Patrick Reed at 23-1, Cameron Tringali at 80-1. That is all the time that we have for this week here on the PGA Heat Check. As mentioned, Brandon back with us next week to talk more PGA. Hopefully he's enjoying his vacation. We'll have our NFL Q&A today, 3:30 p.m. with myself and Ryan Williams, breaking down all your questions for the NFL offseason, talking dynasty, best ball, whatever is on your mind. Swing by today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll be chatting on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel, the numberFire Daily, or the FanDuel Podcast Network. Wow, numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. There we go. Yeah, okay. Totally forgot what podcast feed this is. Brutal. numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. We're there, I promise, despite the fact that I have no idea what it's called. We are there. Just search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions for me, why would you? Based on all that, I am on Twitter at Jimsannes, JIMSANNES. You can follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for setting up the video call for today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your PGA DFS lineups for this week, and we'll talk to you once again next week for more PGA with Brandon back in our lives. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.